Welcome to this week's episode of Pondering Play and Therapy with me, Philippa, and this week my guest is Sarah Naish. She is the best-selling author of The A to Z of Therapeutic Parenting, a book that I use loads. She's an adopter of 5 siblings, a foster carer, a founder of a fostering agency, and a keynote speaker. So, welcome, Sarah, and thanks for finding the time in your busy schedule to come and have a chat with us.
Thank you, Philippa. It's a pleasure.
Can we start with the A to Z of Therapeutic Parenting? Because that is a book that I use and recommend almost weekly, I would say. It's a really great book. How did you come up with it? And all the really realistic, helpful things, because you can literally do the
Yeah.
things that it says in the book. Often there's a lot of theory, and you think, actually, how does this fit into my everyday life? But the A to Z of Therapeutic Parenting, you literally can do what it says. How did that come about?
It came about because when I was raising my children, I realised, as a former social worker, I realised there was a big gap between what we think trauma is and what we think the behaviours are and what actually happens. So I always say, my children taught me everything I know. And the reason I think the book is so good, or helpful, I should say, I couldn't write it when the children were young. I didn't have the time, but luckily I used to write a lot of emails to the supporting social worker, to myself. Sometimes that was a way of protecting ourselves from allegations. I'd record a lot of stuff, and when the children was almost grown up, I realised that I had quite a lot of material there. And when I wrote it, I did a lot of talk to type, and I imagined a parent in front of me, a therapeutic parent, who was struggling with all these things. And I was very conscious that I needed to keep it in the practical. So I wrote the book that I needed that wasn't there when my children were young. That's how we did it. So,
And for anybody who hasn't come across it or used it, it
yeah,
literally is an A to Z, isn't it?
yeah,
So if you are struggling with toileting or sleeping or getting in the car or something like that, you can look that up. Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right. I recommend that people read part 1 first, because that's got all the underlying behaviours. Like, it explains about the fact that children from trauma have a lot of fear, and a lot of the behaviours are fear-based. So it explains all the basics about what therapeutic parenting is. But then you can just dive straight into the bit you want. So yes, if you've got a problem with bedwetting, for example, you just go straight to bedwetting. And I thought it was really important to set out what I'm actually talking about. What do you mean? Because say you're talking about controlling behaviours, people might have different ideas about what that looks like. So the first thing I do is I set out, this is what it looks like, and then why this happens, and then what you can do to prevent it, what you can do when the behaviour is actually happening, and what you can do afterwards. So yeah, so all of that made that I'm always very grateful. People do come up to me when I'm in conferences and say that they've really appreciated the book. And I think that the best times is when people say to me, your book was the only thing I had. I was alone. And I thought, I so recognise that feeling. I so remember feeling completely isolated and nobody gets it. And I was there with the children, and everyone left me to it because they said, you're a social worker, you know what you're doing. And then if you do therapeutic parenting, you get criticised. So the fact that the book has become a friend almost, and that's why we did an audio version as well, which I recorded, because I thought it's important. Sometimes you can just hear a friendly voice that says, yes, you're doing this right. Keep going.
Absolutely. And I think that having someone there, often I work with foster carers and they will say, sometimes I think in my head, what would Philip have said? Or I hear your voice. And it is that being alongside, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't really change the in the moment, but you can be
No.
alongside. And if
Yeah.
people are feeling unsupported, then yeah, having that there is really
Yeah.
great. That really is my next question, is the difference between therapeutic parenting and parenting. Because people, I suppose sometimes I come across therapeutic parenting, you're just giving in, you just you're just mamby-pambying to them.
Yeah,
That what they need is, and that conversation around, do they really need that? And then for parents doing therapeutic parenting, I think it is the hardest thing in the world to
mm,
do
it
because
is.
you
Yeah.
are doing something very different than what
Mm,
we have probably experienced and what society does. And it's not just doing therapeutic parenting, you are literally immersed in it. Can you just talk a little bit about the difference and why it is so hard?
yeah. In the A to Z, I have got a definition of it, which we did with Bristol University when we were doing the research in compassion fatigue. I think the first thing is that people often confuse therapeutic parenting with gentle parenting, and that's
Mm.
because both models use empathy. The big difference, though, is that therapeutic parents would probably be described as very strict but fair. We have cast iron boundaries and we use logical consequences and extended consequences when the child is not fitting into what we want them to fit into. My children would describe me as very strict but very fair. So in therapeutic parenting, we are the unassailable safe base. We always know what's going on. We have our rules. However, we also always look behind the behaviours. So when the children behave in a certain way, instead of reacting to what the child is doing, we are curious and we look behind the curtain and we think, I wonder why the child would do that. And then we might even share that with them and say, oh, I see what's happening here. I think you're a bit wobbly because da 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 da, which is a much more useful conversation than why did you do that? So that's where I think it's different because standard parenting does tend to react to the child. It tends to say, that's it, you've done that, you're going to lose your pocket money. In therapeutic parenting, we know that our children live in the land of now. They are always on the crashing plane. So if you say to them, when the plane has crashed, we're going to go and do so and so, they're not interested because they're on the crashing plane and they're always in that, or nearly always in that survival mode. So we have to be in the moment with the child and work with it that way. And I think that's what makes a lot of difference, really. We can't use cause and effect. We can't say, if you do this on Monday, so and so will happen on Friday. Our children are not projecting forward. They don't care what happens on Friday. So it's too far away.
And I suppose I wonder about therapeutic parenting. It's more about, I suppose that I think Karen Traceman would say it's like curious, not furious. That being alongside, and it doesn't mean that we let the kids get away with stuff,
No,
but
no,
maybe we understand a little bit more, and that there doesn't always need to be a consequence because actually the child themselves creates much more distress and upset and wobbliness for themselves than as a parent we would ever do, really.
that's right. That's right. And sometimes we're looking at putting a consequence in to make ourselves feel better. But what you've got to think about is what you're actually trying to achieve here. So where there is a deliberate act and you feel that you can allow a natural consequence to occur, like for example, the child breaks their phone, they throw their phone, the phone is broken, then I'm going to allow that phone to stay broken. I'm not going to rush out and buy another phone. And I think that if we interrupt that and we say, oh dear, poor you, here's a spare phone, you can use that, there's no learning going on. There's no cause and effect thinking happening. So it's really our job to grow the neurons in their brain, the synapses, to help them to develop that link of, oh, I did this and therefore that happened.
Yeah. So it's like that's a logical consequence or an inconvenience, isn't it? Like, actually, you're
Yeah.
not going to have your phone now for a little while because we need to save up for a new one or we
Yeah.
need to whatever it is. But you wouldn't, I guess you wouldn't do that as a punishment, as in, now that serves you right. You
That's
can
right.
be alongside the child, can't you? And say, oh my gosh, I'm
Yeah.
so sorry you haven't got your phone.
Yeah.
And we'll save
Yeah.
up for a new one. And I guess, again, that's a little bit of the difference between traditional parenting
Yeah.
and the therapeutic side.
Yes, we always talk about natural consequences with nurture. And if the nurture is absent, it's not therapeutic parenting. It does tend to turn into that, well, you did that, so therefore. And all that does is push the child into shame and fracture your relationship. The child already feels like they're bad. We don't need to reinforce that and tell them that they are. But and punishment, there's absolutely no point, because punishment is all about trying to make us feel better, and it just damages our relationship. So the consequence has always got to be linked back to what has actually happened. And if you can't think of anything in the moment, if something's just happened and you're furious and you're like, because we do get obviously angry,
Mm.
the best thing to do is say, this isn't great. I'm going to have a think about what we're going to do. I'll tell you later what I've decided, because you're much more likely to say something appropriate and to do something appropriate when you are not furious and angry and upset. You go for a little walk, have a little bit of time out yourself, and then it comes to you and you can have that little pause, and then you can say, okay, I've thought about what happened this morning, and because you were punching your sister in the back of the car, I'm not actually taking you out in the car for the next couple of days. Like, we're going to walk everywhere because I don't feel like you're very safe in the car. And I know that's difficult for you, but we'll have a lovely chat while we're walking about. That's how you bring the nurture back in.
Mm-hmm.
We've removed, there's a consequence there linked to the car. There's no point. Standard parenting often doesn't link consequences. They'll say, you were rude to me, you've lost your pocket money. Now, a securely attached child might well be able to make that link. Personally, I still don't think it's a great method, to be honest. But our children from trauma living in the moment on the crashing plane, they do not make that link. They just think, by the time it gets to Friday, you don't give them their pocket money, you're horrible, you hate them. So there's no learning going on at all.
And it's, I guess, that is what I talk about with the parents I work with, is that's about maximum impact that we think it's going to have, don't we? So you're not,
Yeah,
teenagers, we use their phone for everything, but actually the behavior is not linked to the phone. We think it's having the maximum impact because
yeah,
they're upset and that's the thing they love the most. And yeah, they probably are upset, but they're cross with us, aren't they? They're not, like you say, they're not making that link, are they, about
no,
actually, this is what happened. I
yeah,
didn't do a chore or whatever it was, and so now I've lost my phone for whatever
yeah, they
time.
don't
It
link that.
it just doesn't. But we feel that we are having the maximum impact on them. And I suppose that therapeutic parenting is different. So the other thing that I was going to just ask about is about carers and parents doing
Yeah,
therapeutic parenting,
yeah,
because it is exhausting, isn't it? And
yeah,
doing it all the time, I don't know, it's probably not possible. You can try to do it 100% of
yeah,
the time, but
yeah.
sometimes we are in our own crashing plane, aren't we?
Yeah, I think it changes actually over the years, because, of course, when you start doing therapeutic parenting, you're consciously thinking about, I need to look behind the curtain, think where this behavior comes. You spend a lot of time thinking about it and doing it. But actually, as you do it more and you start realizing the benefits, because you see the changes in behavior and you see the improvements, it becomes easier and it becomes second nature. So, for example, with my grandchildren, I don't have another way of parenting now. Years ago, I was super nanny, I was a nursery nurse, and that's what I did, standard parenting. And that feels so alien to me now. I don't think I could do it. But of course, sometimes when you get frustrated, that's when you slip back
Mm,
into standard parenting. Oh, for goodness sake, la, 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 why did you do that? That kind of thing. That's just normal human exasperation. But the important thing there is afterwards we think, oh, I can't believe I did that. I should have done it a different way. And I think that I always say that therapeutic parenting is the hardest, most rewarding thing you'll ever do.
mm,
And but I do think it's something that gets easier. Our children don't necessarily get easier. The trauma doesn't necessarily get easier to manage, but therapeutic parenting methods do get easier. They
mm.
become second nature.
And I think that, like you talked about, that rupture that does happen sometimes. I've got a 20-year-old, but when he was a teenager, there was quite a few difficult years, and that frustration of the teenager. So I do all the stuff, and then I just have to say what was in my head.
Yeah,
And I'd say it and I would feel better. But by the time I'd got to the bottom of the stairs, that therapeutic voice would be back in my head of like, oh my gosh, why did I do that?
yeah,
But you can go back, can't you? You can go back and
yeah,
say, I'm
Yeah,
really sorry.
yeah,
That was me. That was my crossness. That was about me. It wasn't about you. And so again, even when we do those moments, the therapeutic parenting element would be actually we go and own that and we make the
yeah.
repair and use the empathy.
Yeah, that's right. We can always go back. And what I always found really interesting was that often, if I did go back and do a repair, often my children would be like, "We didn't notice. Like, what are you talking about?" It's always a kind of a bigger deal in our head than it
Yeah.
is for our children, especially when you're looking after children from trauma, because, a bad day for them in their birth family, wherever they came from, was absolutely horrendous. Here I am apologising to them for a bad day because I was snappy at them yesterday. And then with them, it was often just, were you? Oh. So I think we've also got to be a bit kind to ourselves as well and realise that often it's not making as much of a big deal as we think it is. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. And so well, you wrote the A to Z of therapeutic parenting, and then you've written other books alongside that, haven't you?
yeah,
And if you've written books for children,
yeah, yeah. In fact, I wrote the children's book first,
oh,
and then I
okay.
was asked to do something for parents. So that came about because I do a lot of training and talks with foster parents, and we tend to call in our agencies we call them therapeutic foster parents because of the level of training and the way we all work. And I would go in and talk to people about what I call naming the need, which is when you use a story with a child to say, "I think that you're actually hiding under the bed because when you were little, this happened," and da 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 da. And the foster parents would say to me, "Well, the thing is, sometimes we don't know what happened." And it feels a bit risky if the child's just come into us. So I said, "Well, I know what I'll do then. I'll write a children's story, a true children's story, things that happened with my own children. And then you can read that story to the child. So you, as the parent figure, are reading the words that I said to my son."
Mm-mm.
So that was when we did William Wobbly in the Very Bad Day, and that was an instant bestseller. That went down really well. So then I started writing, calling on things that had happened with the children, and so we've got Charlie Chatty for stealing and lying and exaggerating and things like that, and Sophie Spike, who's always fine and doesn't need any help, and yeah, I think people find that really useful. And a lot of people say to me, I read it to my child and they said, "Oh, that's like me. That's me." And I'm really glad that children see that. And when I do author days, I love those. Little kids come up to me and they go, "Are you really William Wobbly's mum?" And sometimes I'll take my adult children along and they'll say, "Were you Katie Careful?" And they love it because they see they're real people that
Yeah.
really did those things. Yeah.
And those just for people who maybe haven't again experienced them, they're quite short,
Yeah.
very picture-led books, aren't they? I
Yeah.
use them a lot. And so William Wobbly has a very bad day. He's at school, isn't
Yeah.
he? And he's got a big feeling in his tummy, and then his mummy comes along. He's outside the headmaster's office,
Yeah,
and his mummy comes along, and he
yeah,
thinks she's
yeah,
going to be cross.
yeah,
And it's a little bit about the what I like, and I think it's helpful for parents as well, is to think about our facial expressions
yeah,
and how we communicate non-verbally to our children,
yeah,
and because in William Wobbly, when he sees the smile, that's when his tummy starts to get a little bit better.
yeah,
But they're really nice to read to children. They're short, aren't they?
yeah,
It keeps their attention span. And you can just have lovely conversations around, does this ever happen for you? And even I think even if they're not like William Wobbly, it can start a conversation around, no, I'm not like that, but I'm
yeah,
like this. So
yes,
you
yes,
can you start, so some children are like this. What's it like for you when you get told off? It can help with those different conversations, can't they?
yeah, absolutely. And that's why we cover lots of different scenarios and lots of different feelings within it. All the main behaviours really covered. And we've also got, I did one called Katie Careful and the Very Weird Child, and that's written for a child who's already probably the birth child of a parent, and then a foster child is moving in alongside, and it explains to the child about what's going on for that child. but you can read it to both children. So that's
Oh,
helpful.
I haven't seen that one. I'm going to have a look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
really great.
sorry, that one's called Callum Kindly. Callum Kindly and the Very Weird Child. And the Very Weird Child is Katie Careful in it. That's why.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have a look. I'm writing that down. I've got the Charlie Chatty and all those ones, but not that one. So yeah, so that's great. So you did these books, then you did the A to Z, and there's a professionals. I think I spoke to Sarah Dillon a few weeks ago, and she talked about the professionals guide to this.
Yeah.
And that's supporting people like me, social workers, play therapists, whoever, to use the similar strategies within their practice and support parents. Is that right?
Yeah. What I did, because of working in fostering and adoption for quite a long time, now I was very aware about the level of paperwork there is for social workers. And sometimes I think one of the hardest things, we have a lot of people, a lot of foster parents who transfer into our fostering agencies at True and Safer because they are so fed up with getting into a crisis, and then the social worker who turns up doesn't get it. And they're just talking about things that reward charts or whatever. And I thought, it's all very well having people transfer in and working with them, but actually it would be better if everybody got this and everyone understood it. So I thought, what I'll do is we've rewritten the assessment process for foster parents. We've got the therapeutic fostering assessment now. And when we did the A to Z for professionals, we've got tools in there which are absolutely for the social worker to work through. So one of the worst things that can happen to a social worker is when they go into an adoptive foster parent carer and I'm at the end of my tether, I don't know what to do, the child's doing this, and then the parent looks at you like you have the answer. And unfortunately, social workers are not trained at college. They're not trauma informed unless they've done our qualification afterwards. They're just not trauma informed. So I thought, how can we get this so they can get the A to Z professional companion, and then there it is. And it's, if you've got this situation, this is the step-by-step process you go through. You use empathic listening. There's lots of tick boxes, and literally they can then use the A to Z to solve the problem, become more skilled themselves in, because otherwise what happens is the social worker withdraws. They withdraw and they blame because they're out there, they don't know what to do. And I've seen that happen countless times. So the poor family have waited all this time because they're pretty desperate. They speak to social worker and say, we're desperate, don't know what to do. That if the social worker doesn't know what to do, they will also withdraw and say they're not coping. There might be a safeguarding issue, and that's what we see. And that's usually when people contact us, which is avoidable.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's helping social workers, I guess, even often family support workers are put in, aren't they, to support a family, to stop placement breakdowns, things like that. Then I suppose that then helps everybody think about what the foster carer, the adoptive parent, whatever it is, needs, and the child, because the need is in both, I'm guessing.
Yes. My philosophy has always been that if you properly take care of the therapeutic parents, the child will actually be fine, because it isn't the therapists aren't there in the middle of the night when the child's woken
Absolutely.
up and smeared poo on the wall. The parent is. So we have to upskill the parents. We have to enable them and empower them to be really skilled therapeutic parents, and by making sure they're feeling mentally okay. So that's been my philosophy, and that's what we do. So we have empathic listeners, child support workers, as well as a trauma-informed social worker, because that means that the foster parent can pick up the phone and they know that the person answering isn't going to go into blame, isn't going to start saying, I don't know what you've been doing and I don't know about this. They're going to have someone who says, this sounds really tough. This sounds really difficult. I think you've done everything right. I'll come round and see you in the morning, or whatever that needs to be. And that's the bit that's missing, really, I think, in social work, is there's a need to fix, a need to logically apply strategies. And actually, 99 times out of 100, our parents need us to listen to them, really listen to them, empathize with them, and help them to solve the problem rather than judge and blame them.
Yeah. And I guess that's about, like you say, skilling the foster care as well and giving them the information about the impact that trauma and early life adversity has on children, rather than thinking, oh, you're just the foster carer, because
Yeah,
that can often happen, isn't it? That they, some of my friends are really amazing foster carers, and they'll often say they've got a professionals meeting and they haven't invited me.
yeah,
And they are the professional, really.
yeah. They're the main person, and we won't allow those. We won't allow that to happen unless it was a safeguarding meeting about the foster
Yeah.
parent.
Yeah.
If they say we've got a professionals meeting, we just obviously we invite the foster parent along, because when they are assessed with us with the therapeutic fostering assessment, and other people use that now as well, other local authorities and stuff, they also become qualified. So part of the assessment process is they become qualified professional therapeutic foster parents. It's all done online. People love it. So when people say to us, oh, you're not got to be professional, I say, what qualifications do you have in therapeutic parenting? Because our foster parents do. And they are the person who knows the child the most. They're the ones that have got the first-hand experience. How dare you try and make a decision about this child without the person who knows them best there? So we won't tolerate that at all. We just wouldn't go to the meeting.
Yeah, yeah, because I guess it is that valuing of the foster carer's role and expertise, but it's also then helping them to have that knowledge, isn't it? Because again, it's really important that they do have the training. So you talked about a qualification, and you
Yeah,
said about a social workers having the qualification as well. What's
yeah,
that? Just
yeah,
tell us a
that's
bit about
quite,
that.
yeah. Yeah, that's quite important. So at the Centre of Excellence in Child Trauma, which we set, it's a not-for-profit organisation that does all our training, and it has a support network there. It's called the TIPS Hub, Trauma Informed Parents Hub. You can get that at coect.co.uk. So in there, we've also got lots of qualifications, and they are all independently accredited. So we're always looking at filling the gap. So what isn't there? So the one for social workers is also for therapists, and that's a level 4 qualification in trauma informed practice, and that fills the gap between what people have done at university and what they need to meet the children's needs, understand the behaviours, and
Yeah.
support the parents. For the parents, we have a level 1 for kinship carers. We have a level 2 in professional therapeutic foster care. We've got ones for schools, because obviously we've written the schools books. We work with a team of educators. So anybody, and we're just about to release in September a qualification for residential staff working in children's homes. So all of them, that's all about getting trauma informed. They're nearly all done online. We do have the odd face-to-face day where we meet up and do some group work, but mostly people go through it at their own pace and get qualified. So a lot of our foster parents have also done a level 3 in a diploma in therapeutic parenting as well. But that's a portable qualification. They can take it anywhere. Not just like COECT led. It's accredited by cash. Yeah.
Okay. And when you talk about trauma informed, what does that mean for you guys, really? Because trauma informed can have lots of people say we're trauma informed.
Yeah. And they're often not.
Yeah, well, I wasn't kind of going to say, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I was
What
trying
they,
to think of a
yeah.
word around that, sir. Oh, yes.
What they mean is they've done a 2-hour course
Yes.
and now they're trauma informed. But any therapeutic parent will know that you're 3 months in with the child and you're starting to go, oh, hang on, if I do it this way, you tend to be trauma aware practicing once you have lived with children from trauma. But if you are a social worker and you've got lots of experience and you've seen this a lot, you need to become trauma informed and trauma practicing. So you need to become a trauma informed practitioner. There's a world of difference between, let's say, roughly knowing that children from trauma are different and actually understanding how long that takes, what that trauma means, how it responds to behaviors, how that impact that has on parents, and the strategies that we need to use. It's not a 2-hour course. And it always makes me laugh when people say to me, can you come and do a keynote or a talk? And I'm like, yeah, I can, yeah. And they say, what we want to know is, we want to know what therapeutic parenting is, what behaviors we see, what strategies we use, how. And I said, I can do that in 5 days. If they're there for 5 days, we can probably make a good start on that. If you ask me for an hour keynote, it is not possible. And you've got to do, and I think the best thing to do is why our children behave the way they do. You can do that in an hour, the why, because then that makes people curious. But yeah, I think there's a lot of unrealistic expectations out there,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
And trauma informed really means it permeates everything, isn't it? It's not just like we're aware that children who've been neglected might have issues with food. It's more of it's the okay, so what does that mean? How does that
Yeah.
work? How do we change our practice
Yes.
to reflect that? How do we
Yeah.
support the people that we work with to change that? It's about it permeates
Yeah.
everything, not
Yeah.
just, and I don't mean to diminish knowledge. Any knowledge is good, but it's a very
It's a
different
way of
thing,
life.
isn't it? Trauma informed to being
Yeah.
trauma aware.
Yeah. And I can give you an example of that. So when we started safer fostering in Wales, the first thing I did with Alison Douglas, who helps run, she's also an adopter, we sat and wrote the policies and procedures, because the policies and procedures in a trauma-informed organisation look very different to an organisation who say they are trauma-informed but actually do all the standard stuff. So, for example, with our foster parents, if there's an allegation, one of the first things we do is we make sure that the child social worker is aware about how trauma impacts on memory and how the child can confuse what's happened with what's happening. We make sure that's within our policies and procedures, and we have to make sure that people around us are aware about that. So that's just a very small example, but we have to also make sure the therapeutic fostering assessment means that everyone does that, and it means that when the children come in, the people who are looking after the child understand before the child walks through the door what trauma looks like and what they might be met with. It also means you have very high levels of stability, because children don't move. People feel much more empowered. They know what they're doing. But you've got to start with your policies and your procedures, because if you don't have trauma-informed policies and procedures, the second that something goes wrong, people run around saying, oh, we've got to get the child out. And actually we say, oh, what's happened here? How can we put this? It's a very different way of working.
Yeah. And again, that holds the child at the center of what you're doing, doesn't it? And the foster carer in that
Yeah.
actually this relationship is the
Yeah.
thing that's going to be the most healing for the
Yeah.
child. That it's if we start to disrupt and move and change that, actually
Yeah.
we're damaging the healing that we want to happen for the child. And even if it's
Yeah.
only a short break, that they go into, I don't know, fat respite they call it, but people
Short
don't.
breaks, I call it.
Yeah, that's it. People call them different things, don't they? But we might think, oh, well, we'll just move them out for the weekend. But actually, when there's been something so big, often the child needs their safe base, don't they, to
Yeah,
help them.
that's
And if we
right.
move them away from that, obviously, if there is a safeguarding issue,
Yeah.
then of course they should be that they should be safe. But like you say, children disclosing things, we have to be really clear about what that is. And the
Yeah,
relationship they often need is with their safe person or their big person, isn't it? And if
that's
we
right.
take that away,
Yeah.
actually we're doing damage, not healing.
Yeah, because you've got to think about what message you're giving to the child. You know, it's the same with when we're working with schools. We know that some schools are really great and skilled, and we work with some of those people, and some of them aren't. And if you get the messaging wrong with schools, you can do a huge amount of damage. So what we do is when the schools get it wrong, and when they're saying things like, he's been very naughty and he deliberately did this, so we're excluding him. When they start doing that kind of standard schooling nonsense, which doesn't work with children with trauma, rather than being angry and having lots of meetings, we send in free trainers. We put in trainers in the school and say, like, oh yeah, you need to know about trauma. You need to know this is why the child thinks that way. You've got other children in the school that think this way, and this is what you can do about it. And that's a much better way of keeping the child at the school, by changing the school's approach, by looking at what is it the school's doing that's making the child feel unsafe. Let's explain that to the school and help them to change.
Mm.
So some schools listen, some schools don't, and sometimes you do have to move the child because the school isn't trauma informed and doesn't want to be. Often you can get, that's what I did with my children. I used to go in and train the school because it was hopeless. It was hopeless at first.
And so can we just talk a little bit about schools? So the school, again, when we think about traditional parenting and therapeutic parenting, schools are very behavioral, aren't they? They
Yeah,
have the things like golden time and the red, green, yellow stuff, the home book that tells you all the things that they did
yeah,
wrong. All
yeah,
that for children can be quite, well, for any child, I think,
yeah,
quite
yeah,
shaming.
yeah.
Uh, for children with trauma, it's devastating, really, I would say.
Yes,
Uh,
yeah. There's no escape. And then we've seen a huge rise, haven't we, in children being homeschooled. Wonder why. I would have done that with my children. Had I not had 5, I would, because I did need it. For me, school was a break. That's really all
mm,
I didn't expect my children to learn very much, to be honest. That my children all learnt later on. I had realistic expectations, but a lot of the schools just don't get it. And that's why when I met the people at the Wensum Trust in Norfolk, they had changed their schools from standard schools into trauma-informed schools, and that's what they practice. And you saw this huge rise in stability in the schools. So it was that team that helped us to write the A to Z of trauma-informed teaching. So it's like the A to Z, but it's for schools, it's for teachers, and
right,
that's had a
okay.
big impact, because I think schools are starting to understand it isn't about costing loads of money. It's actually just about a change in mindset and taking the reward charts down and being with the child in the moment. So yeah, so that's been really helpful. And we have seen more trauma schools popping up now,
Mm. And
which,
when you work with trauma schools, the fizzy kids,
yeah,
can they manage those? Because often it's the
yeah,
fizzy kids. The quiet kids, like Katie Careful, they just sit at the back of the class and they
yeah,
just
yeah,
slide under the radar, don't they? Until there's a point where people think, "Oh my gosh, they haven't
yeah,
been learning, they haven't been doing it." And then all of a sudden, there's all this fluster and pressure
yeah,
put on. Or you
yeah,
get fizzy kids who
yeah,
just need to move around, can't sit still. And those are the children that often schools find more difficult and start to do part-time timetables with, start to move them out of the classroom, all those sorts of things. Have you found with the work you've done that helping, I suppose, the fizzy kids stay in the class and the careful, quiet children be noticed?
it isn't about helping the fizzy children stay in the classroom. It's about giving them an escape route. If their legs need to run out of the classroom because they've got high cortisol levels, their legs need to run out of the classroom, and no amount of sitting down and talking to the child is going to stop that, because their cortisol is still high.
Yeah,
So, for
yeah.
example, when my son used to run out of the classroom when he was young, school first of all tackled that by chasing him, which surprisingly made him run further. And and then they would give him detentions and things like this, and I would just have a little laugh about it. And I speak to my son, and I made sure that our relationship was intact. And I said, "Oh, the school don't get it." And in the end, I solved that by going up to see the school, because, of course, they were very exasperated by my naughty child who kept running out of the classroom. He was 15 at the time, and I went to see them, and I said, has detention worked? No. Has giving him this worked? No. Has this, yeah, has standing blocking the door worked? Yeah. Good luck with that. No. Has chasing him worked? No. And I said, I'll tell you what hasn't worked. I said, because when his cortisol levels are high, like any other child from trauma, their legs are going to run out of the classroom, and his brain has no way of stopping that happening. It's not him doing it. His legs are going. And that's how I used to talk about it to my son. So I said, so you need to let him go. You need to let him go. And we need to agree a place he can run to. And he's going to stay there. And no one's going to chase him. So we would run to this tree in the field. And the teacher would look out the window and wave at him. And then when he felt better, he'd come back. And he used to have an exit card, so we could go. And surprisingly, of course, that completely dramatically reduced the behaviour. It didn't cost any money,
No,
and it made that this teacher, the class wasn't disrupted because they could carry on teaching.
yeah,
So what often it's just little mindset changes like that that need to happen, really. To
yeah,
me and to you, that's probably like completely obvious. But the 8 of trauma-informed teaching explains all that and explains why we have to do it differently.
yeah. And so what you said, that what you've seen in the schools that where you've worked alongside, that the stability
Yeah.
of children and those
Yes.
exclusions and part-time timetables have reduced.
Yes. And the most important thing, the children are happy.
Yeah.
That's a really, I met an adopter the other day who was coming to work for us as a foster parent, and she's got a 14-year-old child. And she said, and I said, almost with trepidation, oh, how's school? Because usually it's like you open the floodgates and she said, oh, he's in a really great school. It's a trauma-informed school and they've read all your books and they know, and he's so happy there. And I met him and yeah, he's a very happy child. And you just think that's what makes a difference.
Yeah.
There's a lot of in a trauma school, there's a lot of exterior, outside activities happening to help the children's cortisol stay low. So they're not just expected to sit in a classroom all day. There's lots of opportunity for movement.
And because I think often I will talk to parents and carers about what you're never going to get the chance to do is be in a relationship with your child at this age again and
That's
do
right.
that healing, do that emotional connection, do that presence, do that being alongside. What they can do is go and learn maths again at 25 or
Yeah, that's
30.
right.
You
That's right.
can never do that again. You
Yeah.
can't do the emotional stuff again.
Yeah.
You can do it differently, but you can't do the parenting at that age, can
Yeah.
you? And sometimes, I would say probably more than sometimes, it's actually our children's emotional, relational health that should be the priority. Because, like you say, if they feel safe, if they are happy,
Yeah.
even contented, then that is worth in my view, 1,000 GCSEs, because you can always go back and do that again, can't you? You can go and do
Yeah.
access to university or whatever. You can't do your childhood again.
Yeah. And that's what I always say to parents is that, do you know what? The GCSEs and the learning, it comes at a absolutely the wrong time for our children. So, like you say, what we've got to do is we've got to make sure they can form relationships, because if my children reach 16 and they've got 17 GCSEs and they're great at maths, but they can't form relationships, they're going to have a really sad and terrible life. So my job, and that's why I didn't do homework. I said to school, I'm not doing homework. You just work
Yeah.
schoolwork at school. Unless you're going to come around and get the kids to tidy their bedrooms, I'm not doing homework, because I can't change from mum to teacher. I can't do that, and my children can't cope with that. I've got a more important job to do, more important even than the 9 times table. It's about making sure my children develop trust, know what love is, can form a relationship with them, and can parent themselves. That's the most important thing. And all my children went on to do college and stuff like that later on. They all had three of them have worked for me at various times. One of them's written books with me. They all went on and did stuff that they enjoyed. One of them's doing a psychology degree at the moment. But absolutely, they weren't doing that at 15. That
Yeah.
wasn't happening. And I wasn't disappointed, crucially.
No. And I guess that's what we want, is happy, healthy, relational kids, don't we?
Yeah.
So just as we're coming to the end, I know just as we started, you were talking about your keynote speaking and that you're going to Australia to do this.
Yeah.
So just tell us some more about that.
So I was in Australia in October. Was it October, November last year? Yeah, November last year. And I was keynoting at the National Fostering Conference, which was really interesting because I was in Sydney and people were flying in from all over Australia, and foster parents in Australia they're not treated as well, I have to say, as they are in the UK. The money is very poor, and yeah, and everyone was flying in, and I thought, wow, this is exciting, because sometimes I'll go and speak in Birmingham, some of Coventry will say it's too far. So I thought that was quite an interesting mindset. And what I was struck by was that it was almost like it was the first time people were hearing this stuff.
Wow.
And there was this sort of clamoring afterwards and said, we need more of this, we need more. And so, yes, I've agreed to go back and do a tour of 4 cities in October this year. But I've said I would do it only with my friend and colleague, Sarah Dillon, who you've spoken to,
Yeah.
because the need is so great. It needs two of us just to talk to people afterwards. So, yeah, so we're going to be very busy going around and doing some keynotes, doing some training, talking about therapeutic parenting, but most importantly, strategies and solutions for people.
Okay. And you do that in the UK as well? You do
Yes, yeah, I'm off to Doncaster next week. I often go up to Hull. We actually go everywhere. Wrexham. We go everywhere. We go all over the country. We work internationally as well, in Malta, Estonia, Iceland, America. We've been Singapore. We go all over the place. Trauma speaks the same language wherever you are in
Yeah.
the world.
And
So yeah.
is it for particular agencies, or is it conferences that people can come along and buy tickets for, or is it a mixture of both?
It's a mixture of both. When we do our own conferences, our national conferences, we've just done one on trauma and tech, and that's available online now. But that was an in-person, face-to-face one in Cardiff. So those are like available to everybody. Usually we'll get booked by a client, by a local authority or something like that. But we do run ones, and they're all on our website, the events that are coming up. We tend to run a very popular workshop that Sarah Dillon and I do together, which is called What to Do When Nothing Works. We have no preparation for that. People turn up and say, this is the behavior I've got. And we solve it, break it down and solve that on the day. So that has to be in person, really, that one, because there's a lot going on. But yeah, that's my best thing. That's the thing I enjoy most, is meeting other foster parents, adopters, kinship carers. We have support groups, we have coffee meetings, all of that. Yeah.
Well, that's great. And then just one very last question is, you are involved with Safer Screens?
Yes, health professionals for safer screens. So we've done quite a lot of work with them. We've been giving them the advice around the effect of overuse of screens on vulnerable children. And that's what we did at the conference and in Cardiff. As I say, that is available online. Really, everyone talks about the impact of social media, which is absolutely right. It's very negative. People haven't been aware, haven't been talking about the very negative impacts on our children from trauma. They are much more vulnerable, and because they need dopamine and the dopamine hits, they get more addicted to their phone more quickly. And that's also why we're seeing this explosion in, this child has autism, this child has ADHD. They need to get their phones put down. Lots of research on health professionals for safer screens. And very interesting, something like 80 odd % of children said, we wish someone would take our phones away, but we can't say that. So I found all that really interesting.
And
Yeah.
but parents can find it very difficult. That is often the conversation that I have, I suppose, with most parents now. It used to be, I think, sleep and toileting is quite high, but
Yeah.
screens is starting to join that in.
Yeah.
When I'm asking them to end,
Yeah.
that's when the moment of
That's right.
of
That's
conflict
right.
comes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so the Safer Screens thinks about that, does it,
Yeah.
for
Yeah. And in our conference, we tackled that. And the person that spoke about that was Gareth Thomas, who is a parent, SGO and foster parent of 3 teens. And we gave all the tech solutions about how you can overcome that. We talked about that dysregulation and the moment of loss of the screen and that kind of thing. It's a difficulty we don't want to get into. If my children were young now and I knew what I know now about the way screens are damaging our children's brains, I would be taking their phones away and be putting up with the fallout of that. I'm sorry. Literally now look at my grandchildren, look at their phones and think about the damage that's going on in their brains. Phones were not designed for developing brains. Smartphones, I'm talking about. No
Yeah.
problem with the not smartphones. You can keep in contact with those. But yeah, it's really damaging. And I think in the next generation, they'll be looking back at this time and saying, what the hell were we thinking? Why
Yeah.
did we allow this to happen?
Yeah.
So that you can see lots, people can watch our conference online if they want to, or we've got all the research that's behind that, and crucially strategies, because like you say, parents need strategies if you're going to reduce
Absolutely.
the screen time. That's really important.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And it is that I think now we're starting to see that research come out, aren't we? And it
yes,
feels like there's a generation where we are shutting the stable door too
yeah,
late.
yes,
Hopefully, the
yes,
ones that are about to come,
yeah,
we've learned some. I
yeah,
think there's still more to go, but there is this whole, along with COVID, and we won't get into
yes,
COVID, but
yeah,
they've got screens and COVID.
that's
I
right,
think
that's
this is
right.
a really, really tough time, not just for kids with trauma, but for a whole generation of children. And then when you add
Yeah,
trauma on top of that,
yes,
there's a lot of challenges going on, isn't it? So
yeah,
foster parents and adopters definitely need, and kinship carers as well,
yeah,
need
they
that
need those
support,
strategies.
don't
Yeah,
they?
they do,
Um,
they
and
do.
what you are providing is a really great part of that.
Yes.
Um,
And actually, a positive thing to finish on is that because we've become very aware of this, we've had a lot of contact from people might be very pleased to know. People have been on at me for years. They wanted me to write a follow-up to the A to Z for older children. So we're literally 50% through writing that now. We'll finish it in June. It's
Fantastic.
the A to Z of therapeutic parenting, teens and tweens. And within that, we've got our tech specialists, all therapeutic parents talking about screens, social media, gaming, suicide attempts, self-harm, all the teen stuff that we really struggle with. So that will probably be that is coming out next year.
Oh, that will be, yeah, definitely. It'll be amazing because the A to Z therapeutic parenting, I think you can use it all the way through, but there
Yeah,
isn't those very specific
yeah,
things. And life has moved on since you've, like
yeah,
you
that's
say, with
right.
screens and that,
Yes,
since you wrote it the first
yeah,
time.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
why we had to do it. That's why we felt we had to do it. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. That'll be fantastic. So thank you so much for your time, Sarah. I will put some links at the bottom of the description for this so people can go and find the Centre of Excellence. I'll put links to a few of your books so they can start to have a look at that.
right.
But thank you so much
Okay.
for your time. It's been
Okay.
amazing.
No, thank you. Thank you, Philippa.
All right.